Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Dalton Wasserman. And boy, do we got an explosive topic here today. Everybody loves wide receivers. Everybody loves rankings. So here we are ranking wide receivers heading into the 2025 NFL season. Dalton, I hope you're ready because people got takes. People always got takes on the wide receiver. I feel like they always got takes on quarterbacks. They always have takes on wide receivers. You know, some of these other positions, it's like, all right, yeah, we could have a little bit of discussion here, but people got opinions on this position group specifically. So this is going to be a fun one. Hope you're ready for it, buddy.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, I get flashbacks to last week because Max and I did the same thing on the college show last week. He had his top 10 college receivers, and when I was going through the list before the show, I said to him, was this the hardest of all the positions you did? And he said, yeah, by far. There's just so many good players, and you did a top 32 here, and I got to ask you the same thing. I got to think we're going to do this for a lot of positions, heading into the season, obviously, but this might be the toughest one because I look at all 32 of these guys, and I'm like, these are great football players, every one of them. So between narrowing it down to 32 with as many great receivers as we have in the league right now, and then just trying in any way to get the order correct or what we think is correct, I give you a lot of credit because I'm looking through these names and I'm like, this is just, there's so much talent at this position right now that it's hard to narrow in on. You got it in tiers, you've got it in a certain order. I mean, you did the whole 9 yards here, and man, I'll tell you, it must have been extremely difficult.
It is. And these are really talented football players, and I wanted to break it up. Not only, it's ranked 1 through 32, and I feel comfortable with where these guys are ranked 1 through 32. However, I have it also broken up into tiers or buckets. So if, again, we're talking about an argument where it's the same tier of wide receivers, but this one guy I have ranked 20th, you have him ranked 16th or whatever, as long as they're in the same tier, I can kind of understand the argument. But the tiers are really where I have the breaking points between these wide receiver groups because you said it. I mean, there's so many talented pass catchers in the league, and we're seeing that the NFL is sort of following that with their money, if you will, with how much money a lot of these top wide receivers are getting. What Justin Jefferson has signed for, what Jamar Chase has recently signed for, CeeDee Lamb, like guys at the very top we're seeing make top tier money and a big piece of the pie of the salary cap because of what they can do for the game. So we're going to talk about a lot of stats, a lot of great numbers here. We're going to talk about, not only receiving grades, but, wins above average, which is a metric that we have at PFF that we like to lean on. We're going to talk about a receiving grade in single coverage situations, missed tackles forced per attempt, yards after the catch, not just touchdowns, but contested catches, where you have those touchdowns, all that kinds of great stuff. If you want to see that, you can go over to PFF.com, of course, and see all the premium stats for yourself by getting a PFF Plus subscription. That is the best way to do that. All right, Dalton, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off explosive at the very top. I promise I'm not being hot takey for it, and I can't wait to have this conversation because I was even shocked at the result I had for the number one wide receiver going into the 2025 season. And to start tier 1, I have A.J. Brown from the Philadelphia Eagles. Right after him, I have Justin Jefferson at number 2, and I have Jamar Chase from the Cincinnati Bengals at number 3. Now, this is in tier 1, okay? So I want to start the conversation by saying these are the 3 wide receivers who I believe are completely scheme independent, completely quarterback independent, and ones who you can build an offense around no matter what offense they are in, no matter what player is throwing them the football. There's a little bit of that which you have to lean on, right? We look at sort of the quarterback situations and how they differ with these 3 guys. But in my opinion, you can ask these 3 wide receivers to be absolute alphas in any situation, in any scheme with any quarterback, and they can deliver for you. So before I dig into exactly why I have A.J. Brown at number 1 at the top of this list, how do you feel about these 3 being the receivers that I have in tier 1? Would you go even less? Would you go maybe one of these guys alone? Would you say that there's more that we would add to this list? What do you think about this tier 1 of names?
I think to have those 3 in a tier of their own is fine. I think there's a couple other guys in the next tier that certainly would have arguments, right? But I think when you look at these 3, you look at guys who can do anything on a football field. They have their own little specialty each to themselves, right? A.J. Brown, he had the highest receiving grade against single coverage this past year. He was obviously a great player in Tennessee. see, but he's just hit a different gear the last 3 years in Philadelphia. Now that they use him, it just feels like right now he's the most uncoverable one-on-one wide receiver, right? Anytime the Eagles see press man coverage and the box is loaded to stop Saquon Barkley, the ball's getting over the top to A.J. Brown, right? And everybody in the stadium knows it, and nobody can stop it, right? We know he can do things after the catch. He can do it at the catch point. Still a good route runner, even for such a big player, right? So I think I can see the argument for any of the three of them. Jefferson, I would argue, since he's been in the league, has been the best receiver in football. And Jamar Chase winning the Triple Crown last year, racking up the volume that he does, obviously, for Cincinnati. His grade was a little lower this year due to a high amount of drops, but we know what Jamar Chase can do all over the formation. So I totally get these three being in tier one. The argument for that number one spot could be endless. We could just talk about these three guys all day, but I think you're right. These are the three best receivers in football right now.
I think they are. I really do. And I sort of want to break down exactly how I got to A.J. Brown at the very top of the list, and I promise it wasn't just for it to be hot takey, but I have A.J. Brown as the best wide receiver in the NFL, okay? His receiving grade over the last 3 years. So I'm gonna go with two different examples here. I'm gonna go with a 3-year sample size. I'm gonna go with wins above replacement or wins above average, the metric that we have there, the receiving grade, some statistics within it. But then I'm also gonna look at what just happened last year. Okay, what have you done for me lately as well? So from a 3-year sample size, A.J. Brown is the highest graded wide receiver that we have amongst these three. I think Tyreek Hill technically is a little bit higher, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, which we're going to get to in a second, is a little bit higher as well. But A.J. Brown, amongst these three wide receivers, he has the highest receiving grade at a 92.7. When you look at his overall receiving yards, yes, Jamar Chase has missed a little bit of time here and there, but Jamar Chase has played, and we're just looking at regular season here, Jamar Chase has actually played 350 more receiving snaps, and yet A.J. Brown has more receiving yards than he does at over 4,100, and Jamar Chase has just over 4,000. So he beats him in receiving yards there. Yards per reception, A.J. Brown is number one amongst these three wide receivers at a 15.1. Receiving touchdowns, yes, Jamar Chase is higher, but A.J. Brown is second in front of Justin Jefferson with 25 compared to Justin Jefferson's 23. When you look at total drop passes over the last 3 years of these three wide receivers, A.J. Brown has the least at just 11. When you look at yards per route run, A.J. Brown has the most of these three wide receivers at 2.57. And then when you look at average depth of target, still 12.7. A.J. Brown, once again, number one. And then forced missed tackles per reception, A.J. Brown, number one amongst these three wide receivers at 55. So the 3-year sample size is totally there in A.J. Brown's favor. And then when you look at just a 1-year sample size, so just what they did last year, and remember, Minnesota had a great offense the way that they had it with Kevin O'Connell winning 14 games and Sam Darnold playing the way that he was. You look at Jamar Chase, Triple Crown winner, had the most receptions, had the most receiving yards, had the most receiving touchdowns, and yet A.J. Brown, number one amongst these three wide receivers just last year in total receiving grade at a 91.6. And then this is the one that I really love. Whether you are looking at a 3-year sample size or a 1-year sample size, just what happened last year, A.J. Brown is the number one wide receiver in the NFL when it comes to receiving grade and statistics against single coverage situations. That's why I understand A.J. Brown doesn't play a ton in the slot. He's more on the outside, so when it comes to versatility there, it's a little bit less than what it would be with some of these other guys. But when you put A.J. Brown in situations where it's their best cover corner against him, he wins almost all the time. And when they need a catch, they go to A.J. Brown. Whether it's third down, whether it's in the red zone, whether they need a home run play, the Eagles go to A.J. Brown. And Jalen Hurts has had good moments throughout the last 3 years. I'm not going to say that he hasn't, but he's not the quarterback to say like Joe Burrow is, right? And so he has been a little bit up and down, and yet the constant the entire time, no matter where Jalen Hurts has been in a, man, he's on a hot streak, or man, he's in a little bit of a slump here, this dude produces. And so there are so many numbers that I look at, the yards after catch stuff and the touchdown stuff. You figure that Jamar Chase should be number one, and he is in some of those categories, but A.J. Brown's number two ahead of Justin Jefferson. In the categories where you would look at Justin Jefferson is, okay, maybe it is, no, not yards after catch. It would have been more of the contested catch situation for Jamar Chase, but the yards after catch stuff and the missed tackles forced per reception, those would favor Justin Jefferson, and they sometimes do. But then A.J. Brown's number two, right above where Jamar Chase is. So at the very worst, no matter what category or what style of wide receiver you're looking at with these three guys, A.J. Brown is either number one or number two. He's almost never number three amongst these three wide receivers, which is an incredible thing to say, given how different I would say Jamar Chase wins compared to how Justin Jefferson is, or how he wins. So to me, the amount of categories that A.J. Brown has won in over these other two wide receivers over the last 3 years, the 3-year sample size and even the single-year sample size, the wins above replacement, wins above average metric that we have, it all points to A.J. Brown having a higher floor, if you will, than these other two wide receivers, and even at times having the higher ceiling depending on what you were looking at. I did not go into this exercise thinking that I would have A.J. Brown as my number one wide receiver in the NFL. But no matter what metric you look at and no matter what sample size you look at, this is the dude, and he is my number one wide receiver going into 2025.
Yeah, I get it. I think what it speaks to, the receiving grade sometimes, obviously it can be a volume exercise, and Jamar Chase putting up all the numbers and yards, and the Bengals are throwing the ball every play because they have to, but I think it speaks to the efficiency of A.J. Brown, right? And the fact that he does just as much work on 79 catches that a guy like Justin Jefferson does in 105 to 110, that, Jamar Chase had 127 receptions last year in the regular season alone. They didn't even make the postseason. So you talk about a level of efficiency in an offense that wants to have balance, but then they know anytime they want to, they can chuck it up there to A.J. Brown, and he's going to get open. He's going to make contested catches. 19 contested catches last year was 6th most in the NFL as well. So I think the fact that he can do anything anytime he wants, he can do it in an extremely efficient manner. I mean, you just wonder, you imagine if he were to get the volume of those other guys, where the total numbers would be as far as yards and touchdowns. But being that efficient and being that ex-receiver for that offense that obviously just won the Super Bowl, it's just as valuable as what those other two guys do. So I get the argument from an efficiency standpoint for sure. He doesn't necessarily need all of that volume, 170 targets like Jamar Chase got, to put up those types of numbers. So there's an argument for any of the three of them. Like you just mentioned, they're all fantastic players.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of give Brown his flowers there because, again, I sort of went into this, and when I'm making the preliminary list before I start to reorder it, I just wrote, like, all right, cool, Justin Jefferson's number one, A.J. Brown's number two, maybe we're throwing Amon-Ra St. Brown in there, or, sorry, I would say Jamar Chase number two, all right, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, like, you're throwing in names, but the more I researched, the more confident I was that, like you said, sometimes these other wide receivers, it's a volume thing. It's a scheme thing. A.J. Brown's production, and not just production, the two words that I would lean on, one of them you lean on there, efficiency, you use that, and then dominance is the other one. The efficiency and the dominance that A.J. Brown has had over the last 3 years, including this most recent season, I don't think can be denied. And that's why I have him at number one on this list. Any thought to, I have Jefferson at number two, I have Jamar Chase at number three. Do you favor one of those guys one way or the other?
No, it's tough. Not necessarily. They're a little bit different. I lean Jefferson just because it feels like he's so darn consistent, and no matter who the quarterback is, right? We've seen him succeed with Sam Darnold, with Kirk Cousins, with Josh Dobbs, with Nick Mullins, with whoever Kevin O'Connell has to throw out there, obviously J.J. McCarthy, and I think it's the first reason that you look at the Vikings season coming up and going, okay, J.J. McCarthy's going to be fine, because anytime he gets in trouble, just throw it to number 18, and he's going to find his way open, right? So I think as a classic just route runner and just a guy who can dice up any sort of defense, I might lean towards Jefferson, but I get it with Chase too, because any football field he steps on, he's the best athlete. He can line up anywhere. You put him in motion. Hell, you can put him in the backfield, and he could be a running back for you. That's how good he is with the ball in his hands. So, we could have arguments all day about these top three. I might even just barely lean Jefferson number one, but again, we could talk about these three all day, and we got 29 more to go, and we're going to have plenty of arguments going the rest of the way, but they're all so good, and they do it in different ways that you have to just love watching all three of them. But Jefferson, I think you're right having Jefferson too there. He's just, you talk about high floors, you know exactly what you're getting out of him every single year. Yeah. And when we look back, even again, 5 years from now, what Jefferson's done in his career, 10 years from now, he's tracking to be one of the all-time greats as well.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think that the what you mentioned with the floor being a little bit higher for Justin Jefferson, I think that goes into it. You talk about the drops that Jamar Chase had. And it feels like a lot of what Jamar Chase does is more feast or famine than it is for Jefferson. And I think the feasting part of it is, I mean, you watch some incredible takeover games from Ja'Marr Chase. There's no doubt about it. But you also have the games where it gets a little bit quiet. And he has some of the games where he has a handful of drops, right? And so I just don't think that you get a lot of that from Jefferson. And so really it comes down to preference for me, which guy that you would rather bet on. But if you are somebody that likes a higher floor player, I think that Justin Jefferson presents you a higher floor than Ja'Marr Chase does, although they both have a crazy elite ceiling. So that's tier one. I want to spend a little bit of time on that, but really more focus on A.J. Brown because we've talked about Ja'Marr Chase and Justin Jefferson, I think, a lot over the last couple of years. And I think for A.J. Brown to get his due, not just in tier one, but at the very top of this list, I wanted to make sure we focused on tier two. Let's talk about tier two here. At number 4 to kick off tier 2, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions. And as we go through this list, Dalton, I'm going to kick to you and sort of where you want to start, what wide receiver you want to start with. But at number 4, I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown there. Some incredible numbers for him over the last couple of seasons, which we can dig into. 5, I have Puka Nacua from the Los Angeles Rams. 6, CeeDee Lamb from the Dallas Cowboys. 7, again, Nico Collins coming off back-to-back incredibly impactful seasons for the Houston Texans. And then at number 8, I still have Tyreek Hill here at number 8 because, man, when you push it back to that 3-year sample size, I mean, Hill is number 1 in some of these categories. You know, overall receiving grade, yards per route run, like he just was unbelievably dominant, I would say, in 2022 and 2023. 2024 was a step back. I wonder, though, was that a team and a quarterback situation really taking a step back, or what do we think of Tyreek Hill now that he's above the age of 30? Do we think it's going to be a little bit of a drop-off for him? So I ended up putting him at number 8. There's no way I could have put him below tier 2, but I ended up having him at this last number here in tier 2 at number 8. Where do you want to start? Who do you want to touch on first?
I think that's a great second tier there, and I think a guy who could actually jump even higher into it or possibly even one. I want to start with CeeDee Lamb in Dallas because I think this past year between Dak Prescott's injury and then just the lack of a second threat, right? I think what you saw last year is without Brandon Cooks, kind of out of his prime now, without a legitimate X receiver to take the top off and open things up for Lamb underneath, you're talking about somebody who saw a lot tighter windows and just couldn't make as much happen. You saw a lot less production on those shorter throws and less production after the catch, but I really don't think it's his fault. I mean, people watching, you can check out a video breakdown Max and I did last week of why George Pickens is going to be so important to this offense. And yes, Pickens is really good and he's great on the deep ball, but it's about opening things up for CeeDee Lamb again. So I think he's somebody who could be in for a huge bounce back year if Dak Prescott is healthy, if George Pickens is the deep threat that they need him to be, or at least the threat of that, right? The decoy on the outside that just doesn't allow you to double and triple team and focus your whole defense on Lamb the whole time. So it wouldn't even shock me if by the end of this year, if you did this again at the end of the year, if CeeDee Lamb is actually moved up into that first tier. That's how good, that's how talented he is. He's talented enough to be up on that first level with Brown and Jefferson and Chase. He just needs that legitimate second threat, and he's got it now in George Pickens. And Dak Prescott coming back healthy, playing like he did in 2023, obviously plays a huge part in that too. I would argue he might even be the most talented guy in this tier, and we just have to see that Dallas offense operate the way that it's supposed to.
We've got some people in the chat saying, like, hey, what are these rankings? These aren't fantasy rankings. These are our wide receiver rankings, which wide receivers that we believe are best going into the 2025 season. When I say we, it's a lot of PFF stuff, right? I mean, it's the eyeball test, what we're watching, the film that we're watching, but also a lot of the PFF numbers that we have. Ultimately, though, this is my ranking. So these are my top 32 wide receivers. You know, Dalton might have things a little bit different. That's why we're going back and forth here on the show. But just wanted to clarify that. I see people in the chat asking what these rankings are. These are legitimately who I think are the best wide receivers headed into the 2025 season. So it's not just okay, what have you done for me lately, or the 3-year sample size. It's not just about what you've done. It's also, do I think you are going to either replicate that or get better or worse going into the 2025 season? So there's a little bit of projection in there as well. I agree with you. I think CeeDee Lamb over the last couple of years, he's been a big volume guy, and I think the year prior, that volume was also tied with efficiency and how they were able to play. And Dak Prescott, I think, should have gotten some looks for MVP 2 years ago, and I think that he did here on this channel when we got to talk about that. Ultimately, obviously, he did not win MVP, but this past year, just not the same type of quarterback, and obviously with him being in and out of the lineup, it was tough for CeeDee Lamb to continue to have that efficiency, so he took a little bit of a step back. But talent-wise, certainly, he is somebody who could be knocking on the door there of that tier 1 of wide receivers. He is absolutely good enough to be able to do that. Okay, where do you want to go next with this tier 2 of guys? We do need to hit on Amon-Ra St. Brown at some point. So I don't know if you want to start there for the next guy that we're talking about here, or if there's somebody else that you wanted to chat about.
I think I like that you left Tyreek Hill in this tier. I'll let you get to St. Brown next, but Hill also at number 8 here. Look, last year a little bit down. I believe he had the lowest receiving grade of his career, and that was still around a 77. But it's really due to a stretch without Tua. Again, when Tua was hurt, the passing game went down the toilet, right? They had a hard time pass protecting as well. So I think there's a lot of factors in Tyreek Hill's lack of production last year. And I'm going to say the same thing at some point here with Jalen Waddle in this top 32. But I think that's just what you have with both of those guys, where the numbers from 2024 might tell you, oh, he's on the downswing. But to me, still an explosive playmaker, still one of the best receivers in football. I think in the exact right spot here. Number 8, I think, is a good spot considering he's now in his early 30s. Maybe he's losing a quarter of a step, but you're also talking about a team that needs to protect their quarterback, needs to keep their quarterback healthy. We know Tua's only played all 17 games in a regular season once in his career. Obviously missed a handful of games last year, and they couldn't protect him. So I think there's factors outside of Hill's control that led to that drop in production. But you mentioned it before, over the last 3 years, best receiving grade in football, and that's carried heavily by 2022 and 2023, where he was just unstoppable. Still, last year, not quite as unstoppable, but again, factors outside of his control in Miami's offense. So I'm glad that you left Hill this high as opposed to going, oh no, he's on the downswing, one down year, there it goes the speed threat and all of that. He's still a great football player and very well deserves to be this high on the list.
Yeah, I just think that it would be too early to have him out of the top 10 of wide receivers. Now, look, if you have him out of your top 10 wide receivers and obviously he's over the hill and he doesn't play well this season, okay, I'll tip my cap to you. But when you look at how unstoppable Tyreek Hill was in 2022 and 2023, even with him being 31 years old now, I can't have him lower than this. Just the threat of him even being close to what he was in those 2 years is a top 10 wide receiver and somebody that the defense has to pay attention to at all times. Like, you've got to either put your best coverage guy against him in man coverage if you dare, or you have to play 2 deep safeties because you have to have some sort of cap coverage to be able to have multiple eyes on this guy at all times because of what he has been able to do and the respect that his game and his accomplishments over the last couple of years command. So I couldn't have him lower than 8. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'll be honest with you. I initially had him in tier 1 because of how good his numbers are. So I've referenced it a couple of times. We have a number at PFF, or a metric that's wins above average, right? And any baseball fan out there, they know exactly what WAR, wins above replacement, or wins above average is. It basically is exactly what you think it is. How much higher are you than the average NFL player at your position? And where does that come into how valuable you are in terms of how much you deserve credit for winning ball games? So Amon-Ra St. Brown, on a 3-year sample size, number 1 in the NFL in total WAR earned, and also average season WAR from him. He also has the second highest receiving grade in the NFL over the last 3 years, second only to Tyreek Hill. And then when you look at what he did even last year, top 5 in receiving grade. Now, scheme, I think, goes into this quite a bit, right? They build the passing attack around him. It's a lot of things that are a little bit easier when you look at his, what was his average depth of target? I got to find this here.
8.3 yards this year.
8.3 yards. And 8.3 yards this past year, it's been 7.7 over that 3-year sample size. So things are easier. When you get the ball a little bit earlier in the play, a lot of things, you can lean on scheme to really help you out with that. How you were aligned pre-snap. Was there pre-snap motion in there? Did they get you moving before the snap? Things like that. Are you lining up against the right kind of leverage and you're creating that separation pretty easily? All of that to say, I cannot discredit this guy too much for how good, how impactful, and how high of a floor he is. Every single week, you know that Amon-Ra St. Brown could get certainly over 75 yards for you, over 100. I mean, like, that's the kind of player that we're talking about here. Is he the biggest guy? Is he the fastest guy in the world? No, but he's unbelievably smart. He understands his place in the scheme, and they emphasize that offense around him. I can't wait to see what he's able to do outside of Ben Johnson this year. Now, it doesn't seem like things are going to change too much for them with their new offensive and defensive coordinators because, if it ain't broke, don't fix fix it. So they're going to keep building their passing attack around him with a lot of the same weapons there, a lot of the same thought processes and philosophies of how they want to move the ball down the field. It's going to move through Amon-Ra St. Brown, and deservingly so, as somebody who has been incredibly valuable just for how reliable he has been over the last 3 years. That part of his game can't go understated and overlooked. So I had him at number 4 there to start tier 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned reliable is the word, Mr. Consistent. I mean, the last 3 years, his receiving grades, 90.4, 91.3, 90.2. That'll do it every year. And one more thing I want to just throw out there that I noticed now. 4 full seasons in the NFL, almost 600 targets. He's only dropped 13 balls total in those 4 seasons. There are guys who dropped nearly that many last season alone, and he's only dropped 13 over 600 targets almost over 4 seasons. I mean, as reliable as he is, you think about it, I'll tell you what, if you were picking, hey, it's 3rd and 8, I need one guy to just get to the chains and find a way to get me a first down, St. Brown might be the guy you pick. Yeah, I think you said the right word, maybe among the most reliable receivers in football, and you know what you're getting out of him every single week.
Okay, so I think who else do I want to touch on this list? I mean, Nakua has been unbelievable. When he has been out there over the last 2 years, it's been nuts. He had the highest receiving grade of any wide receiver this past season, and he missed a bunch of time, but holy cow, was he dominant there. And then Nico Collins, back-to-back elite receiving grades for him. He is somebody who I wanted to get in tier 2 here because of just how dominant that he has been here. That brings us into tier 3. Let's get into tier 3 here. Now, I will be honest. This is the toughest part of these rankings. Tier 3 is the toughest part because you have some guys that, okay, you could think about in tier 2. Did I want tier 2 to be a little bit bigger? You look at tier 3. Okay, did I want tier 3 to be a little bit bigger? And then even the order within tier 3. I've got my reasons for certain guys here on tier 3, but ultimately, we're starting out at number 9 because remember, Tyreek Hill was ranked number 8. Number 9, I have a Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver, Mike Evans. Got 1,000 yards once again last season. And even if it was just barely, man, did he look good when he came back from injury. I mean, he looked 3-4 years younger. I was so shocked at how good Mike Evans was moving, how explosive he was moving, how determined he was. Obviously, he wanted to continue to get that streak, but man, he was just so dominant. I believe it was the highest or the second highest receiving grade of his career, even at his age.
Highest, yeah.
Second highest of his career this past season, but an elite receiving grade nonetheless. I have T. Higgins at number 10, Drake London at number 11. As you can see with those 3 guys, it's kind of hard to parse them out. They really are in a mini bucket within this tier 3. I then have Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, and Terry McLaurin. I'm telling you, I'm losing sleep over this group here, Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, and Terry McLaurin, because I think that all 3 of these players could have their name in tier 2 a year from now. And it really is just a matter of how much credit am I giving them? How much do I really want to lean on, okay, what are they going to be like moving forward? The numbers that they have had over the last couple of years, some of their contextual situational numbers when it comes to efficiency or overall volume or all of that. But ultimately, Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, Terry McLaurin, I have at 12, 13, and 14. And then to round out tier 3, I have Brian Thomas Jr. coming off an incredible rookie season last year. And then Devontae Adams, who I still think has plenty left in the tank now with the Los Angeles Rams at number 16. So exactly halfway through this list, I didn't do this on purpose, but that rounds out tier 3 for me. What do you think, Dalton?
No, it's an incredibly talented tier. And you mentioned Neighbors. I'll start there with the Giants. You mentioned that possibly a jump into tier 2. If they figure out this quarterback situation, he could be in tier 1 by the end of the year or the end of the next 2 years. I think he's that talented. That's a guy that I look at a lot in the same way that I look at Jamar Chase. I go, what can't he do? He can play outside. He can play in the slot. He can get deep. He can make things happen after the catch. You can line him up anywhere. I think Neighbors of any of these guys probably has the best chance to get into tier 1 to be a top 3 to 5 receiver in the NFL. They just need to figure out this darn quarterback situation. Now, I think with Russell Wilson going in there this year and being kind of the deep ball specialist that he is, because that's where the Giants really struggled last year. I believe they were 29th in the NFL in deep passing grade as a team. Obviously, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, anybody else playing quarterback had problems getting the ball downfield. Russell Wilson had the best deep passing grade in the NFL last year with Pittsburgh. So I think things are going to get a little more vertical. And then you look at, if it works, the transition to Jackson Dart as the vertical passer that he was at Ole Miss. If they can make that transition work and then eventually Dart's the franchise quarterback, it's in part going to be be because Malik Neighbors is an elite player and a potential top 3 to 5 receiver. I think he's as talented as those top 3 guys that you mentioned. They just need somebody to get him the football downfield consistently.
No, I agree. I mean, when you look at those 3 that I was kind of talking about there with Malik Neighbors and Garrett Wilson and Terry McLaurin, Malik Neighbors had the highest receiving grade last year at an 87.1. I mean, and that was with a terrible quarterback situation. And that was even with, you talked about how the drops hurt Jamar Chase's grade last year. Malik Neighbors had 8 drops last season. And so to think, what if we got that number down to 2? Like, I mean, we'd be talking about somebody who would probably have a top 5 receiving grade in the NFL with Malik Neighbors last year. And again, that is with his quarterback situation the way that it was. When you look at I would say that the wins above average numbers really favor Terry McLaurin and what he has been over the last 3 years. Now, again, it's razor thin. If you wanted to flip Terry McLaurin going up to number 12, I could understand that. When you look at him, the area, and I think which you would most boast him, is the wins above average number. The 3-year sample size, or actually this is just last year, it was a 0.60, which is 7th in the NFL of all wide receivers. And then when you look at the 3-year sample size, his average of a 0.44, and then his total cumulative wins above average over the last 3 years of a 1.31, that's 7th most in the NFL. So he had the 6th best score there just last year, and he has the 7th best score overall over the last 3 years. The only wide receivers who have a higher cumulative wins above average score than Terry McLaurin over the last 3 years are Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's it. So I think that Terry McLaurin is somebody who I could have really anywhere on this tier 3 list. And he is one of the guys that makes this so difficult when it goes, man, I mean, you could have a little bit more argument for him to be a tier 2 wide receiver. And I think that's always the way that I have gone about the Terry McLaurin conversation is if you have him top 20, if you have him top 15, if you have him top 10, it just doesn't matter. This guy is just a really good wide receiver and he is going to produce. He deserves to be talked about, certainly within this tier 3, but I know that people would make arguments for him even in tier 2. Ultimately, this is where I had him in this list. But I had to talk about him in a positive light. I think some people might look at him at number 14 and think that that's disrespect. I don't mean it. There's just a lot of good wide receivers in the NFL, and I think he is in that category with Malik Neighbors and with Garrett Wilson to say, hey, with a favorable situation in 2025, we could absolutely be talking about this guy as a top 10 wide receiver a year from now.
Yeah, he's just never been allowed to put up the elite numbers until this past year because he never had an elite quarterback until he got Jaden Daniels in Washington, right? So obviously Jaden Daniels fixes a lot of problems over there, brought him to the NFC title game, but it's also about unlocking Terry McLaurin to see the full extent of his talent, and that's going to continue with better pass protection, with Deebo Samuel now as the number 2 over there, with Zach Ertz returning, with the run game, that's still going to be cranking. So McLaurin's every bit as talented as that spot, deserves right there at number 14. One more guy I want to go over because I think he's super underappreciated considering also the quarterback situation we've seen in his career. Drake London up there at number 11. I'm so glad you have him in this tier, at least as somewhere here. I mean, you could have arguments about him versus Neighbors or Garrett or whatever, but look, 3 years in the NFL, Drake London has graded in receiving grade, has ranked 10th, 25th, and then 6th this past year. And that's with Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, a Kirk Cousins off a torn Achilles throwing to him, and then 3 games of Michael Penix. And 2 of the 3 games his last 2 games this year with Michael Penix were 2 of his 3 biggest games of the season. I actually think Penix and London is about to join that tier of the next great quarterback wide receiver combo we have in this league. They're still going to want to run the football with Bijan Robinson, but Penix threw to a very similar player in Rome Odunze at Washington. He found immediate comfort throwing to him in his 3 starts last year. I think Drake London's a guy who's in for a huge year, and I'm glad that you brought him up in this tier because he's another one. Kind of like A.J. Brown, the efficiency that he has shown his first 3 years, fantastic. He just hasn't had the quarterbacks that get him the ball often enough. Now I think he's got one in Michael Penix, especially one with a rifle of an arm that can throw it down the field. I think Drake London's production is going to explode this year as well.
And number 1 in the NFL in contested catches over the last 3 years. And you talked about his receiving grade this past year was top 5. It was number 5 in the NFL. 3-year sample size, he's 9th. So he has the 9th highest receiving grade over a 3-year sample size there. And he is 12th in the NFL when it comes to wins above average over that 3-year sample size. And then he was 10th in the NFL for wide receivers last season. So Drake London also fantastic. Again, like he's in that conversation. You could flip him and Mike Evans. You could flip him and T. Higgins. But those 3 guys, it's kind of funny. It's like you can kind of see how my brain works here within this tier 2 of those 3 guys is Mike Evans and T. Higgins and Drake London, who have done it just a little bit longer, a little bit more established right there as those guys who are in that category. And then you have some guys who, outside of Terry McLaurin, who, again, has been doing it for a little bit now. You're talking about guys who could descend into the top 10. Any thoughts on Brian Thomas Jr.? They're number 15. Thoughts?
Oh, boy,
it was unbelievable last season, man.
It was a great season, and it's odd when you consider when he really started to rack up huge numbers. It was actually with Mac Jones as his quarterback, and the team just deciding, look, this guy's so good, we have to get him the ball any way we can. And I think the thing I was most impressed with, because at LSU he was a vertical, he was a deep threat, right? That's just what he was. He didn't do a ton after the catch. He wasn't the most refined route runner, and it felt like as we got later into the season last year, when look, with Mac Jones as your quarterback, with Trevor Lawrence hurt, you're not going to chuck the ball deep a whole lot. You have to find other ways to win. So I think if there's anything that Jags coaching staff that just got let go of, I should say, that did a great job, they allowed Thomas to play every role in their offense. And I just think about the possibilities of him and Travis Hunter that we're going to see in this offense with Trevor Lawrence back in as the quarterback, healthy, hopefully with a better offensive line. That's a passing game as a unit that could really explode. But Thomas is a legitimate number 1 guy, proved that, exceeded every expectation that he had going into his rookie year. And now he's got, it's hard for me to even call Travis Hunter a 2 because he's never been number 2 at anything. So, I mean, if that's the 1A and 1B that you're looking at with a healthy Lawrence throwing the ball the way that we know he can. Hopefully Liam Cohen can kind of get some of the footwork back right that he kind of lost a little bit last year, and he was forcing the ball downfield. I think the way that Thomas was used, the way that Hunter can be used on the other side, this is a passing game that could be really dangerous, and the first reason is Thomas' emergence last year.
All right, tier 4, tier 5, and tier 6. We're going to get to those in a second, but before we do that, talking to all the parents out there, asking them a question: what's your child's future success look like for you? Maybe it's them getting to travel the world. Maybe it's them owning their own business. Maybe it's just them living a comfortable, happy lifestyle with their family, whatever that looks like. You can help them achieve that with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With this kids investment account from Fabric, you guys can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest while they're minors, but a kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf, gives their investments so much more time to grow. It's all online. You can manage your child's account right from your phone. Starts with just $20, no contribution limits to it. Tax advantages. Funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000, plus there's no commission fees to it, just a low flat monthly maintenance fee. Funds can be used for anything. Doesn't have to be just for when they're older. It could be when they're younger as well. Tuition, tutors, music, sporting events. When they're adults, though, it can be, maybe you're helping them buy their first car, their first house, starting that business, whatever that looks like. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, tier 4 for me. This is where we start to get into a little bit more uncertainty, a little bit more projection with some of these players. Devonta Smith, to start this list off at number 17, not much of a projection here. I mean, he's just been really solid, and solid maybe is not doing his game justice. He is a fantastic wide receiver, and even with A.J. Brown there on his team, he is still able to shine. He's got PFF receiving grades in the 80s. I mean, he is just he's somebody that's an ideal wide receiver too, honestly, in the NFL, and I think that Philly is lucky to have both of those guys there. So he starts off tier 4, not much of a projection. What you see is what you get in a great way with Devonta Smith. I have Chris Godwin at number 18. Now, he's coming off that ankle dislocation and that injury there, but Chris Godwin would absolutely be in tier 3 if I didn't have to think about what he's going to be like post-injury. And if he comes back and he's the Chris Godwin of old, I mean, he was off to a roaring start last season. Perhaps it would have been a career year for him before he got hurt. But now I have to factor that in of what he is going to be like. An ankle dislocation, I mean, that's not an easy injury to come back from. And so Tampa, they say that they're happy with where he is in his rehab, obviously being able to re-sign him and bring him back in free agency. But he's somebody who truly does it all. I mean, not just as a receiver, but he's a blocker. He's got really reliable hands. He can play in the slot. He can play on the outside. He does everything that you want from a wide receiver. So I couldn't put him lower than 18, but certainly a fully healthy Chris Godwin and what he was doing last year could have been in tier 3 if he kept going. Brandon Ayuk, a little bit of the same thing, right? He's coming off a major knee injury. Last year, even before he got hurt, it was not a great season for him, and I think just the San Francisco 49ers in general, it was not a great season for them. But the year before, I mean, he was one of the best receivers in football. He had one of the highest explosive scores that we had of any wide receiver, passing it deep down the field, these massive, impactful, deep passing plays. So I didn't want to put him lower than 19 out of respect for what he did the previous season, although there is a projection there. DJ Moore took a step back last year as Chicago's offense did, but again, somebody who earned an elite receiving grade in 2023. Jalen Waddle, we talked a little bit about this with Tyreek Hill. Somebody who has been an elite receiver before and still has that talent to do so. He's still a young receiver who is could very well be continuing to ascend in this league. Just the offense took a step back last year, and his production did as well. Ladd McConkey as a rookie, I put him in tier 4 just because of how uncoverable it felt like Ladd McConkey was last season. DK Metcalf and what he's been throughout his career as a contested catch monster, now moving from Seattle over to Pittsburgh. I have him at 23. And then Chris Olave, somebody who absolutely could be a tier 3 type of a wide receiver in this league, maybe even a tier 2 type of a wide receiver, but got an extensive concussion history there. We're going to think about that and talk about that moving forward. And then, of course, no quarterback really established on that roster anymore. That goes into it. So I just want to see Chris Olave go through a fully healthy season, because if we do, we're talking about a really, really talented football player. But the injuries, a little bit of up and down play from him and just that offense, it's why I didn't want to have him lower than tier 4, but there's just a lot of uncertainty with Chris Olave there. So long list. Where do you want to start here? Who do you want to touch on?
I actually want to start with Brandon Ayuk, because you mentioned the way that 2024 went, where he never found his footing, and then he got hurt. You have to remember also, he held out until he signed a contract like the week before the season started. So he really held out all of training camp, all preseason practice, all of that, and then pretty much just tried to step on the field, and it wasn't going to be the same level of elite, right? He had a huge game against the Cardinals, but otherwise wasn't the same as the year before. We have to remember, in 2023, he was second in the NFL in receiving grade, 91.7, including postseason, put up almost 1,500 yards. This was a legitimate number 1 receiver, and I think if we didn't have the injury question, even if he played a full season last year and had a solid year, I think Ayuk might have been a guy that would have been in actually tier 3 instead of tier 4 last year. My instinct is to throw it away. And I think we can just get back to, okay, Brandon Ayuk's going to be healthy next year. This team is obviously centered now around Brock Purdy. We haven't talked about the Brock Purdy extension at all. He's getting $53 million a year, and Ayuk, at just 27 years old now, is still going to be a massive, massive piece here. He's so important to this Niners team. I know they drafted Ricky Pearsall. Jawan Jennings is a good player, but especially with Debo gone, with the questions around the running game and Christian McCaffrey, they desperately need Ayuk to be at least this good, if not better, if they're going to get back into postseason contention, especially considering that they've spent most of their draft on defense. They're trying to fix the defense this offseason, and Ayuk, they need him to come back and be as good as he was in 2023. If he can do that, he actually deserves to be higher on this list. I get the questions coming off a year that was really kind of wasted between the holdout and the injury, but he's got as much talent as any of probably the top 20 receivers that you have, 15 to 20 receivers you have on this list. He just has to put together a full season, have a normal offseason, get back healthy, and get back to what you were in 2023.
John Wick in the chat with the $5 super chat. Shout out John Wick. Love the movies. Terry McLaurin was second in the NFL in touchdowns last year. He's above Nico Collins. Y'all are tripping. I think that both are fantastic wide receivers. Nico Collins had better receiving grades, both from a single year and a 3-year sample size, than Terry McLaurin. And when you look at just single coverage receiving grades, so receiving grade in single coverage situations, Nico Collins, once again, better than Terry McLaurin in a 1-year sample size just last year and a 3-year sample size. So, look, really good wide receivers. Again, we're talking about guys that had, Nico Collins had 7 receiving touchdowns in single coverage situations. Terry McLaurin had 8. Terry McLaurin did have more contested catches. There's no doubt about it. Not trying to take either of those things away from him. They're both really good wide receivers. And I think that the way in which Nico Collins has won over the last couple of years has earned a little bit higher receiving grades. He's been a little bit more dominant. dominant. But those are two great receivers. But that's sort of, again, the numbers that I leaned on a little bit here to try to separate these guys a little bit. Okay, anybody else in tier 4 with that conversation? Thoughts on like Ladd McConkey and Jalen Waddle being in here? Are they in the right spots here? I feel like Jalen Waddle, literally nobody talks about him anymore, and I still just think he's a really good wide receiver who was, unfortunately, his season last year was the byproduct of the Miami Dolphins taking a big step back. But I'm pretty comfortable with both of these guys here in tier 4. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think Waddle, you have the same thing as Hill, where actually Waddle really was the one that suffered the most with Tua and his injuries and lack of pass protection. And just, again, a lack of production, I should say, that came from factors outside of his control. I'm not all that worried about Waddle. Obviously, less efficiency last year, but they just need Tua healthy. That's going to be the entire determinant of the Dolphins having any success this year, is keeping Tua healthy, getting the ball to Hill and Waddle, and letting those guys be the explosive players that they are. And then McConkey, I'll tell you what, the thought I just had just now, 85 receiving grade, just absolutely tore it up there. He's the Chargers' #1 receiver, no question. How many other years have we had where Ladd McConkey might have won Rookie of the Year? Honestly.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, because you had the great quarterback play, especially Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, Brock Bowers with a historic season, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. But there are years when McConkey probably would win Rookie of the Year in the season he had. And the fact that as a rookie and a second rounder at that was 12th in the NFL in receiving grade, I mean, the Chargers now, they're just trying to build around him, right? They're like, okay, we hit a home run, and it goes back to that decision to take Joe Alt over somebody like Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, and the faith that they had in getting someone like McConkey in the second round. I mean, that he certainly made that pay off. I think McConkey, he's closer to being one of the elite players in this league than people think he is, and I think it's just that he was a bit overshadowed by so many other great rookies in the great offensive rookie class that we had last year. But we certainly can't forget about him, and considering what he did in his rookie year, you can't put it past him to move even further up on this list in the next couple of years.
Okay, let's go to tier 5. I wonder if I wonder if I get the most pushback from this one actually here on tier 5. 25. I have Zay Flowers from the Baltimore Ravens. 26, I have Marvin Harrison Jr., who, yes, things started out slow for Marvin Harrison Jr., but I really do believe that the 2025 is going to be a next step up for a wide receiver prospect that I absolutely loved coming out of Ohio State. Speaking of Ohio State, number 27, I got Jackson Smith-Njigba from the Seattle Seahawks there in that spot. Rashee Rice from the Kansas City Chiefs at number 28. And then I got Josh Downs at number 29. So 3 guys who... smaller wide receivers, can play from the slot, can dominate from the slot, can be separation dudes, and then you just have Marvin Harrison Jr. kind of in the middle there. So it's a little bit of a wrench in the slot wide receiver or separation wide receiver conversation. But thoughts on that order there and that with the tier 5 wide receivers?
I'll tell you what, I just think about how darn important Rashee Rice is, not just to Kansas City, but really for, I think, the scope of all of the AFC contenders, right, and the AFC title race. Because, I mean, this is a legit #1 receiver who put up an 86.1 receiving grade in his rookie year, got hurt last year, but had an 85.5 and big-time totals through the first 3 weeks of the season. I think Rice getting back healthy, when you look at, okay, now you've got Xavier Worthy as the complement. They started to figure out how to use him last year. The struggles of Travis Kelce last year and kind of the decline that we might be seeing, but maybe Rice being there opens things up a little bit more for him. So I think, I know the Chiefs' offensive line has been such a big story, and the guys that they kept and let go of, and the pass protection and where that's at, and they got beat in the trenches in the Super Bowl. But I think the return of a healthy Rashee Rice is just as important as anything, because now if you've got that receiving core spearheaded by him at the top, and then Worthy, and then Smith-Schuster, and then all the other guys, then you start talking about, okay, this offense gets high-flying again. They really can line up anywhere on the field, inside, outside. They desperately need him to come back and be that #1 receiver. Let Mahomes and Andy Reid worry about the pass protection, but if they're loaded with weapons, you're going to get a lot less blitzes coming their direction, especially on that left side. So I think Rice is a very, very important player, again, not just for the Chiefs, but for the entire AFC playoff picture and how that could look towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that Rashee Rice being a part of that offense is paramount because of what they want to do, right? They've drafted, if you just look at the types of wide receivers that they have on that team, it's a lot of guys who beat zone coverages. Like they don't want to, they're not trying to set up a lot of one-on-one balls, right? They're not trying to just like chuck it up there to somebody for a contested catch. Like they want guys who they can scheme up the right way, who earn separation pretty quickly, and who know how to cut through zone defenses. And Rashee Rice knows how to do that. And he was the best. He was the best player with the Kansas City Chiefs at doing that over the last 2 seasons. And so having Xavier Worthy, I think, is great for them there. But Rashee Rice, I agree, him being back for a fully healthy season is going to be very, very important for this team. When I think that I might get some pushback from Jack Smith-Njigba being a little bit lower than say like Marvin Harrison Jr., Zay Flowers. I like to lean on the receiving grade versus single coverage situations because, again, it kind of tells me, like, okay, how much can you create separation beyond just being schemed up in a certain spot to be able to do so? If the offensive coordinator aligns something correctly for the defensive coordinator and they don't know what's coming, and they get a certain play in a really good situation where they're facing off coverage or they're facing a leverage that they know how to go up against, and the throw couldn't be easier, like if it's wide open. I don't want to not give a wide receiver credit for that, but it's easier to do, and you have more help within the context there. For Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think he's a really damn good wide receiver. I don't want to say that he is not, but when you look at his grades versus single coverage, it's worse than what it was significantly lower than what Marvin Harrison Jr.'s was, because he was in a lot of single coverage situations, and he innately, just who he is as a wide receiver, knows how to win more in those situations. And then it was also lower than Zay Flowers. So that's how I ended up with him below those two guys. Is I just look at Marvin Harrison Jr. and I think that he is going to take a major step up this year. I have faith in the talent there that he is going to be even better. It's sort of hard to compare these wide receivers anyways, but ultimately from a 1-year and 3-year sample size, Smith-Njigba's numbers were not as favorable as Zay Flowers. Now, it was close. It was close between these two guys. I want to say that. But yards per route run, overall receiving grade in single coverage situations, all of these numbers favored Zay Flowers. So that's why I have Flowers over him. I'm just sort of believing in the uptick in production that we're going to see from Marvin Harrison Jr., and then that's why I've got JSN sitting there at number 27. So any thoughts on Jackson Smith-Njigba? When I looked those up, I felt pretty confident about kind of where I have him. I think he's a really good football player. I think he's going to be wide receiver 1 for that Seattle Seahawks offense, and we'll see what kind of production that ends up yielding. But ultimately, looking at a lot of those single coverage situations, it's why I had pretty a good amount of confidence in sort of where I have him in these rankings.
Yeah, no, I mean, he could certainly move up this list even now a couple of spots, and he's a slot-only player, and look, I have no issue with that. I think if you're a great slot receiver, that's fine. I think CeeDee Lamb plays that role pretty well near the top of this list as well, and I think for me, the multi-year thing kind of that's out the door for me with Smith-Njigba, because I thought his rookie year, he just wasn't used properly. He just wasn't featured in the offense. Last year, when Ryan Grubb was there, so I had to think about that because now he's back in Alabama. When Ryan Grubb was there last year, he did a great job of featuring Smith-Njigba in the slot, featuring him especially as a zone beater. So hopefully Clint Kubiak can do the same thing here in Seattle, because I felt like he wasn't used properly at all in his rookie year. He was used in a fantastic manner for his production last year. Now you get the question of Kubiak and Sam Darnold coming in and how to continue that. So I think he's a fantastic player. Could he be a couple of spots higher? Sure, but let's see another year out of him before we get there.
Okay. Shout out Josh Downs, who I also think is a fantastic wide receiver, who I wanted to make sure I got there. Now we're at tier 6, so we're getting to the end of the list here because we just got through 29. These are the last 3 wide receivers that I have in here, and then I would love for the chat to give me their honorable mentions, because I'll talk about some honorable mentions, some guys that I thought about here at the back end. Tier 6, I just have Deebo Samuel from the Commanders. I got Courtland Sutton from the Denver Broncos, and then I got Jameson Williams from the Detroit Lions. So those are the 3 guys that I have rounding out the top 32, because the exercise, asked me to do the top 32. Ultimately, I think tier 6 of wide receivers maybe could go into the 40s. Thoughts on those 3 guys that are right there? I understand Deebo hasn't been the dominant player that we've seen from him, but that's why he's much lower than, I think he was around the top 10. Either it was on last year's list for PFF or the year before, just coming off some incredible seasons. But it's been a while since we've seen that, so I wanted to sneak him in here just because it feels like I am buying Deebo Samuel and what he could be for the Washington Commanders more than other people seem to be. But that's why I got him at number 30. Your thoughts on these guys, and then who maybe didn't make the list?
No, I'm buying Deebo going to Washington. Absolutely. I think you could see a bounce back from him. Look, we actually did see it this year. We just only saw it for the first half of 2024. Weeks 1 through 8, 84.2 receiving grade. That was the 7th best in the NFL. And for the season, he was still 4th in the NFL in yards after catch per reception. He's still Deebo Samuel. I think it's more the second half of the year. That entire 49er offense started to fall apart. Trent Williams being hurt, really hurt the pass protection. Brock Purdy went through a cold streak, which means Debo's going to go through a cold streak. I also think in Washington they have enough stability in the backfield where they don't need to force Deebo Samuel to play running back. Maybe here and there is a fun gadget thing, but I think you're going to look for him more as a true receiver in those after-the-catch situations. The Commanders ran the 6th highest rate of screens last year. He's going to play a big part in that. He's going to open things up for McLaurin down the field because now you have to play this back and forth of, well, McLaurin's a deep threat, but we also have Deebo underneath that we have to tackle. I think he could still be a monster in this offense. And look, yeah, maybe he's not a top 10 receiver in the league, maybe not the best pure route runner like guys like Justin Jefferson or somebody like that, but I think Debo's in for a bounce back. I think a cold second half of the year last year when the Niners lost 7 of their last 9 games was more about the team as a whole than it was necessarily about him. And they had so many injuries. We know the Niners offense also works better when they're ahead and when they can get into play action and everything like that. With McCaffrey hurt, they couldn't get into that. Trent Williams, so it was a mess last year in San Francisco. I think Debo's going to a great spot. The Commanders got great value in that trade for him, and I think he's a perfect complement to Terry McLaurin out there.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what that duo can do together. You know, you got some people in the chat like shouting out Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers, if I was continuing this tier 6 group, he would have been in there. George Pickens would have been in there. Calvin Ridley would have been in there. Like, these were a couple. Stephon Diggs, I still would have had in there, right? Stephon Diggs is getting a little bit older. He's not as good as he was in his prime. He's coming off the knee injury, but I probably would have thrown Stephon Diggs there into that situation as well. I kind of wanted to get Juwan Jennings from San Francisco. You know, last year he was fantastic. I'm very eager to see what he could be this year. Is he their go-to guy? How much is Ricky Pearsall getting into the mix? Or are they really running things through Juwan Jennings at the wide receiver spot, at least until Brandon Ayuk gets back to full strength? So I think that he's in that conversation as well. Jameson Williams is somebody who, it's too feast or famine for him right now, but damn, this dude's a game changer. You know, like the 26 explosive plays that he had this past season, he had a couple of games where he had over 100 receiving yards. Quarterback rating when targeted over 100. I mean, even that's with just a threat percentage of 18%. I mean, he's not even in the 20% for threat percentage of how often he's getting targeted per route that he is running. So he's too much of a game changer for me to leave him off this list. And so I wanted to have him sneak in here at number 32. Again, Calvin Ridley's been doing it for a little bit longer. Stephon Diggs has the higher peak a couple of years ago. Jacoby Myers, I think the floor is a little bit higher. George Pickens is a better contested catch wide receiver. But just what he brings to the offense and how he could take the top off of defenses, I wanted to get Jameson Williams, and I gave him the nod here, even though his PFF grades, overall receiving grades, might be a little bit lower than a couple of those other guys. Just the explosiveness and the threat that he is when he is on the field, I snuck him in there.
Yeah, I agree with that. The guy that I was going to bring up that you mentioned in the honorable mention part of that was Juwan Jennings. I think very quietly 16th in the league in receiving grade last year. And once Ayuk went out, Jennings was actually their best player against man coverage. And that, I think, means a lot when you have a team that sometimes can struggle. And Brock Purdy at times can struggle to throw into those tight windows, into tight man coverage. Jennings really tough, really good in contested situations. I will not be shocked at all now that he's San Fran's number 2 wide receiver. If Ayuk is healthy, and then Pearsall, I think, is going to work in the slot a lot. I think Juwan Jennings might work his way onto this list by the time you do this next year, maybe even into the top 25. He's really, really good.
He was the toughest one for me to know what to do with, because I agree with you. The contested catch stuff from him is nuts. Like, it really is. I mean, the best of Juwan Jennings this past year, absolutely worthy of being on this list. I just didn't know exactly what to do with it. If he has another year like this, he's not just getting into the 30s. You're not just sneaking him in at 31, 32. If Juwan Jennings has anything close to the year that he had last year, we're talking about him in the early 20s probably of rankings, maybe even higher depending on if he plays a little bit better. We've got some shout outs for Khalil Shakir and for Jaden Reed from the Buffalo Bills and the Green Bay Packers. I think these guys are good wide receivers. Again, if I was extending this to the tier 6 as big as it could be, maybe I'm getting those guys in there. I'm pretty comfortable with having them as the honorable mention type of players, but I think I'd have Jaden a little bit higher than I would have had Khalil Shakir. But these are good wide receivers, obviously good players for their offense, but I thought about them, and I comfortably kind of had them right around this honorable mention category and in this tier 6 if we would have expanded it a little bit further. Any thoughts on either of those two?
No, I mean, both terrific players. I was thinking about Shakir as well as kind of, we don't think about the Bills having that big time number one receiver, but if there's anything close to it, it is Shakir and what he can do all over the formation, and he's just got that reliability, especially that Josh Allen loves so much on third down. I want to ask you something, actually, because we'll play a little game here. So 4 2024 rookies were in this top 32, right? How many guys do you think from this year's class, this 2025 class, do you think can get into here? You had 4, I believe, taken in the first round, couple more taken early in the second round that might have big seasons. Who do you think maybe breaks into this top 32 from this year's rookies?
Tet certainly can, right? I mean, Tet is of the mold of the guys who were 9, 10, and 11 on this list, of Mike Evans, T. Higgins, and Drake London, right? It felt like those were the comps for Tetairoa McMillan. And if he is the wide receiver 1 in Carolina, and if he has a fully healthy year, I fully believe that he's going to get somewhat the near 10 touchdowns, and he's going to get over 1,000 yards receiving. So he probably gets over 1,100 yards receiving and probably something close to 10 touchdowns if he is that wide receiver 1 and gets that kind of volume. So absolutely, I think that Tet gets in here. That could be the case. I think Matthew Golden is sort of the sneaky one, because I've talked about how much I love this landing spot for the Green Bay Packers with him. And I think that just the type of wide receiver that he is, he's got a better chance to get into this list next year than Jaden Reed does, because Golden, to me, not only can do some of the underneath stuff that Jaden Reed can do, some of the yards after catch stuff, but I even think that Golden is just as good of a route runner, and he's got that deep speed to him. And he could be somebody who, I think he had over 400, 500 yards just on deep passes of 20 or more yards this past season for Texas, and that was with a passing offense that was, yes, explosive at times, but a little bit up and down with his efficiency anyways. And so he's in a situation where when Jordan Love wants to dial it deep, no Christian Watson for probably most of this season. Dontavian Wicks has been very up and down with how reliable his deep catches have been when it comes to just coming down with it, not dropping the football. Matthew Golden could absolutely be in a spot where I think that he's in this top 32 when we get to this exercise next year.
No, I mean, it's going to be that's fun. I think that situation in Jacksonville is a lot of fun with Thomas and Hunter, and it wouldn't shock me one day if they're both in the top 15 to 20 of this list, if not higher. And the other one I want to throw out there is Jaden Higgins for the Texans, because I think he's clearly their number 2 guy. Just missed out on the first round. I do wonder if the Texans would have stayed there at 25, maybe if they would have just taken him anyway. And fun fact with that one, so Nico Collins was the only receiver in football with a perfect 99.9 receiving grade on intermediate targets, all right, 10 to 19 yards. Jaden Higgins was one of just 4 college football receivers with a perfect intermediate receiving grade as well last year. So if you have any question as to where C.J. Stroud is going to throw the football to these two guys, and I know maybe it even seems redundant considering the size and their skill sets, and they're both kind of those ex-receiver types, but I think Jaden Higgins, the question is going to be all year with the Texans, can they just protect C.J. Stroud? But if they can, boy, they got some really good weapons now. When you talk about they're trying to fix the offensive line, but with Higgins and obviously Jalen Noel, I don't think Jalen Noel's going to break into this list, but I think Higgins could get enough volume where we start talking about him as like, wow, him and Collins as Batman and Robin down there in Houston, that could be really dangerous as well.
Ricky in the chat saying Kyle Williams as well. I would love for Kyle Williams to get in this mix. I don't know if he quite gets it this year because it's kind of crowded and he'd really have to break out, but I would love to see it because that means that Drake May is going off as well. A couple of other guys in the chat sort of in the honorable mention category, Rashad Bateman, Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Addison, Adam Thielen, a couple of guys like that as well. I'm curious to see what Adam Thielen is like this year because I played really well last season. He's getting up there in age. Like, is there a fall off? Are we going to see it this year? I'm a little bit worried about Adam Thielen, especially with Tet being there now. Like, it might get a little bit. I wonder if it gets a little bit political in Carolina because if Tet's going to get the number 1 wide receiver targets and volume, are they going to do their best to basically say like, hey, we got to give Xavier Legette like every opportunity to get his stats and get confidence and be our wide receiver 2 after Tetairoa McMillan? Or are they just going to say like, hey, if Adam Thielen's better, we're going to throw him the ball? Because I think that some fans would tell you, well, like, of course that's what they're going to do. The politicking behind the scenes and having a guy who's a first-round pick who you don't want to be a bust, like, there's a lot. Knowing that he is younger, Adam Thielen doesn't have a lot of years left in the NFL, that all goes into it. So I'm very curious as to how the receiver room is going to shape out in Carolina. And shout out Jalen Coker as well, who had a good year last season. But we would love to hear from you guys. We know that you got takes on wide receivers. We saw them in the chat throughout the entire show, but hit us up in the comment section on social social media as well. Let us know who your top 5, top 10, maybe even top 32 wide receivers in the NFL are. If you want to see all the premium stats, do some more information gathering on your own, go get a PFF Plus subscription. Now would be a great time to do so you can do things like this throughout the summer and make sure that you don't stay bored and that your football mind is fed throughout these next couple of months. That's it for us this week, but we have some more great content coming on this channel. Dalton, do you know which film breakdowns you're doing this week? Can I give people a little teaser? What are we doing this week?
We are going to have a guy that you just mentioned in Tetsuo McMillan and the Carolina Panthers, and then also what Ashton Ginty brings to the Las Vegas Raiders.
I'm very excited for those film breakdowns. Make sure you guys are liking this video, but also subscribing to the channel to make sure you don't miss out on any of the summer content. We're going to be doing rankings like this, but also a lot of those film breakdowns. And we have a very, very fun, creative series that is coming at some point. I can't give away too much here, but it's going to be one of my favorite things that we have ever done here on this PFF YouTube channel. That's coming later this summer, so we're going to get to that at some point. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the PFF NFL show. We'll see you guys next time.